Ahora sí, comenzamos. Muchas gracias a las compañeras por la interpretación al inglés y a indonesio. Y queremos compartir que este es el segundo seminario web de una serie de dos partes que analiza y expone
Thank you
los
so much,
ataques
everyone. We can get
económicos y
started now.
militares que
And
Estados
so, thank
Unidos,
you
con
to the
su
comrades
ideología
who are helping with
imperialista,
the
está
interpretation.
llevando a
This
cabo
is the
contra las
second of
regiones
two-part
claves del
webinar
mundo.
series to
El
analyze and
seminario
expose the
web
ongoing
de hoy
economic
se
and
titula
military attacks currently
Agresión
being
y
launched by the
saqueo imperialista
imperialist
estadounidense en América
United States
Latina y el
against key
Caribe.
global regions across
Nos
the world.
centraremos en los
Today's
ataques
webinar
imperialistas
is titled
estadounidenses
U.S.
contra los
Imperialist
pueblos de
Aggression
América
and
Latina,
Plunder of Latin
el
America
Caribe
and the
y en
Caribbean.
general
We will
el
focus on
hemisferio
U.S.
occidental.
imperialist attacks
La creciente agresión imperialista estadounidense en
uh,
América Latina y el
against the
Caribe
people in Latin
se
America, the
deriva del
Caribbean, and
declive
also the Western
estratégico
Hemisphere in
general de
general.
los Estados Unidos, que ha
The
renunciado a su
intensifying U.S.
posición como
imperialist
única
aggression
potencia mundial
in
dominante
Latin
y ahora
America
se
and the Caribbean
identifica
is
con
rooted in the
China
overall
como su
strategic decline
principal
of the
competidor
United
económico
States
y
from its
rival
previous
político.
position as sole dominant
En
world
su
power
intento por
and its
preservar
identification
su
of
estatus
China as its chief
unipolar
economic
dentro de un mundo
competitor and
multipolar,
political
la
rival,
crisis de su
as
clase
it attempts to
dirigente
preserve
la ha
its
llevado a
unipolar status within a
volverse
multipolar
cada
world.
vez más
The
fascista,
crisis of its ruling
actuando con
class
un
has caused
carácter
it to
más
become increasingly
explícitamente
fascist,
imperialista y
acting
chauvinista
more
con el tiempo.
explicitly imperialist and
Un claro
chauvinistic
ejemplo de
with
esto
every
es el
passing day.
corolario Trump
A
de la
prime
doctrina
example
Monroe,
of this
ilustrado por la
is the Trump
estrategia
corollary on the
desobligada
Monroe Doctrine,
más reciente de
as
los
illustrated
Estados
with the
Unidos bajo
US's
la
most
administración
recent
Trump:
NSS
mantener a
under
América
this
Latina y al propio
Trump
hemisferio
regime
occidental como una
to
esfera de
maintain
influencia y
Latin America
desplegar
and the Western
una
Hemisphere itself as a
retórica y
sphere of
acciones
influence and to point
abiertamente
outright
colonialistas en
colonialist
su patio
rhetoric
trasero.
and action in their own backyard.
Además, el auge del fascismo
In
en
addition,
Estados
the
Unidos ha
intensifying
señalado a los
fascism in the
migrantes
US has
latinoamericanos y
targeted
caribeños
migrants from Latin
como
America and the Caribbean as,
narcoterroristas y
quote,
chivos
narco-terrorists,
expiatorios de la
as
crisis actual.
scapegoats for the current
Desde
crisis.
principios de este año, Estados Unidos ha lanzado una
Since the start of
ofensiva
this year,
táctica
the
en
United
América
States
Latina
has
y el
conducted its
Caribe
own tactical
mediante
offensive
acciones
within Latin
como la
America
invasión de
and the
Venezuela
Caribbean
y el
through,
secuestro de
but
Maduro y
not
su
limited
base,
to, the following
el
actions:
endurecimiento
invading
de su control sobre
Venezuela
Cuba,
and kidnapping
intensificando el
Maduro
bloqueo,
Flores,
la
tightening the
injerencia
inhumane
abierta en
stranglehold on
elecciones como
Cuba
las de
through
Colombia
intensifying the
y la
blockade,
creación de un
openly
frente
interfering
fascista
elections such as
unido
in
a través
Colombia,
de
building its
títeres
own
de la
fascist united
llamada
front through
Alianza
puppets in the so-called,
Escudo de
quote,
las
Shield of
Américas, entre
America
otros.
alliance, and so many other
Esto
actions.
forma parte integral de su
This
conflicto
is part and parcel
interimperialista con
with its
China,
inter-imperialist
debido al
conflict with China.
importante comercio
Due
de
to the
tierras
large rare
raras y de
earth and
minerales
critical
críticos que
minerals
China
trade,
lidera,
China is
así como
leading
a sus alianzas
in,
con el
as well as
movimiento de la marea
alliances with
rosa,
the
que ha
pink tide,
reivindicado su
that has
soberanía
asserted their
nacional
national
frente a Estados
sovereignty
Unidos
against the
desde
United
principios de
States
este siglo.
since the turn of the
Ante
century.
la profundización de la
With the
crisis
worsening
imperialista,
imperialist
Estados
crisis,
Unidos
the
ha
US has
recurrido a la
turned to
agresión
bloodthirsty
sangrienta
aggression
y
and
acciones
unilateral action
unilaterales
to,
para preservar su
to preserve
posición.
its position.
Ante
In the
esta
face
acción
of such
unilateral,
unilateral
socios más
action,
pequeños de Estados
junior
Unidos, como
partners of the
Canadá, se
US,
han
such as Canada,
distanciado
have
cada vez más del
increasingly split
imperialismo
off from US
estadounidense debido
imperialism
al aumento de
due
los
to the rise
aranceles
in
y a
tariffs
los intentos
and
de Trump
Trump's
de
claims
convertirlo en un
of
Estado
making it
miembro
into a
51, con
51st
el
state,
objetivo de incrementar su
aiming to
propio
increase
saqueo
their
en
own
América
plunder
Latina
of
y el
Latin
Caribe,
America and the Caribbean,
especialmente
especially
dado
due
que
to
la
half
mitad
of
de los
Canada's
recursos
mining
minerales de
assets
Canadá
being
se
located here.
encuentran en esta región. Sin embargo,
However,
incluso en medio de esta crisis,
even in the midst of this
la
crisis,
población no se
the people will
ha
not
silenciado. Ante
and
esta
have not
ofensiva,
been silenced by this
estadounidense
offensive,
y luchar por su
but
soberanía
are rising
nacional
up
en
en
pos
masse to
del
oppose
socialismo.
US imperialism
Para saber más
and fight
sobre
for their
la
national
contradicción
sovereignty
entre los
on the
imperialistas de
roads
la
towards
región,
socialism.
Estados Unidos y Canadá, así como sobre la
To
propia
learn more about the
agresividad del
contradiction between the
imperialismo
imperialists of the
canadiense,
region, the
damos la
US and
bienvenida
Canada,
a nuestro
as well
primer
as the
orador, al
aggressiveness of Canadian
compañero
imperialism itself,
Malcolm
we welcome
Guy,
Malcolm Guy,
coordinador regional
regional
de
coordinator
ILPS
of ILPS Latin
Latinoamérica y el
America
Caribe,
and the
y es un
Caribbean.
honor para mí
It's
presentar
an
a un
honor for
gran
me
compañero
to
y
present
camarada.
this
Adelante, compañero Malcolm.
great friend and comrade. Please, Malcolm.
Muchas gracias, camarada Samuel. Warm greetings from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Un saludo muy cordial desde Montreal, Quebec, Canada. My presentation today will be in English. So I'm very pleased to have been asked to talk with you today about the role of Canadian imperialism in Latin America and the Caribbean. I've lived most of my life in Canada, and today I split my time between Canada and Guatemala, where Samuel lives. As coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean for the International League of People's Struggle, or ILPS. In this short intervention, I would primarily like to challenge some of the myths surrounding Canada, whose ruling class has managed to paint a picture of a peace-loving country open to immigrants and refugees, supposedly gentler and kinder than our nasty neighbor to the south, the United States of America. While this may be true of an important section of Canada's 41 million citizens who fought for and won universal public health care, for example, it's certainly not the case when it comes to Canada's ruling class. The Canadian capitalist class has its own profit-hungry imperialist objectives, which it achieves to a great extent by hiding behind the coattails of US imperialism, politically, militarily, ideologically, supporting and abetting the warmonger Trump and the warmongering but more sweet-talking presidents that have come before him. This includes support for the January 3 attack on Venezuela, the US Zionist war on Iran, the Zionist state's ongoing genocide in Gaza, and the invasion of Lebanon, to name just a few. Some facts. Canada is the second largest country in the world after Russia and is located just north of the United States. It has abundant freshwater lakes and rivers and natural resources, but a relatively small population for its huge size. It's primarily made up of immigrants, including my family, who immigrated to Canada from England in the 1950s. Canada was colonized both by the French and the British beginning in the early 17th century. The British eventually defeated the French in 1760 and became the dominant colonial power in Canada. During this colonial period, the Indigenous population of Canada was decimated. Today, there remain 1.8 million officially recognized Indigenous peoples in Turtle Island, as Indigenous people call this country. They constitute only 5% of the Canadian population and are made up of three main groups: First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and speak an amazing number of languages, about 70 different languages. However, the country is officially bilingual, with French and English being the official languages. As such, Canada is a monopoly capitalist state and a second-tier imperialist power. About 70% of Canada's exports go south to the United States. As Samuel mentioned, Trump is constantly repeating his threats to incorporate Canada into the United States. But militarily, this is already pretty well the case. Canada's military is deeply integrated with the US military, especially through the Joint Military Command known as the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. And 80% of Canada's so-called defense purchases come from the US. Under current Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada's industrial development has been pegged on the so-called defense industries to increase Canada's military capacity and to better harmonize with the US war machine. And to respond to Trump's demand that Canada spend 5% of its GDP on guns and other killing machines by 2030. It's estimated that that would cost Canada up to $200 billion a year, money going to guns and bombs instead of into schools, affordable housing, and healthcare. Through NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and other coalitions, Canada has participated in imperialist wars on the Soviet Union, Korea, Vietnam, Libya, Afghanistan, where it sent 40,000 troops, to name just a few. Canada also provided the refined uranium that was used to make the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Canada is considered an energy superpower with the world's third largest proven petroleum reserves. And a fact you may not know, it is the top supplier of crude oil to the United States. Of course, Canada has relations with all the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and is home to a large diaspora of communities from Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad Tobago, as well as Colombia, Mexico, El Salvador, and others. Every year, thousands of temporary workers arrive in Canada, making the trip from Guatemala, Trinidad, and other countries of the region to work on Canadian farms, planting, tending, and harvesting crops. Most stay only for the summer season, but some now work all year round in greenhouses. Most are denied the right to stay in Canada, are tied to one employer, paid relatively low wages, and are often exploited and mistreated. My partner Marie and I meet many of the temporary agricultural workers on the plane when flying between Montreal, Canada, and Guatemala City. By the way, Marie and I are documentary filmmakers who have filmed since the early 1990s about the treatment of newcomers and temporary workers to Canada, with most of our films shown on Canadian TV. So we know somewhat of what we speak. Far from the welcoming country it portrays itself as, Canada has been following the US lead in lowering immigration quotas, blocking entry to migrants and refugees, while deporting thousands. Like Saudi Arabia and other countries, Canada now favors temporary workers as a source of cheap labor with minimal rights. In 2025, last year, Canada deported 22,500 foreign nationals, mostly from Mexico, India, and Haiti, the highest annual total in its history. And this year, the Canada Border Services Agency, or CBSA, is currently still deporting about 400 individuals from Canada each week. While they receive less attention than the despised ICE agents in the US, the tracking, arrest, and expulsion of migrants in Canada is well underway. So much for Welcome to Canada. Which brings us to the impact of Canadian mining companies in Latin America and the Caribbean, and their continuing human rights abuses and environmental destruction. Some 70% of mining projects in the Latin American region involve Canadian companies to some capacity. Nearly half of the world's publicly traded mining and mineral exploration companies are Canadian, with assets totaling $215 billion across 98 countries, and that was in 2022. So why do these companies work out of Canada? Primarily because Canada is a tax haven for mining companies, and its laws regarding resource extraction are among the laxest in the world. Among the nastiest mining companies based in Canada is the Toronto-based Barrick Gold, one of the largest mining conglomerates in the world. At its Pueblo Viejo mine in the Dominican Republic, it has a 60-40 joint venture between itself, Barrick Gold, and the US-based Newmont. This is the 6th largest gold mine in the world. What about for the people who live close to this mine? The mine has a 114-meter tall tailings dam called El Yagal, which looms over the area, holding toxic waste from the mine. Local residents report having to clean their house twice daily to remove a layer of black dust that accumulates on every surface. Due to water contamination, they're obliged to survive on 15 gallons of bottled water delivered twice weekly for drinking, cooking, and bathing. And now Barrick Gold is recently proposed an expansion project that would triple the land the company leases for its mining operations and create a second tailings dam, forcing the relocation of a further 6 communities comprising hundreds of families. And then, what about Canada's role in Haiti, a country I visited many years ago at the invitation of local progressive forces? In that country, Canada's government colluded with the United States and France to remove the duly elected president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, in a coup d'etat in February 2004. 500 Canadian troops participated in a US-led invasion which consolidated the coup. So much for Canadian troops involved in peacekeeping. As Canada's progressive historian Yves Engler has noted, since the overthrow of Aristide's government in 2004, progressive Haitian newspapers have described Canada as an occupying force, a coup supporter, or imperialist hundreds of times. They've detailed Canada's role in destabilizing the elected government in Haiti, building a repressive Haitian police force, justifying politically motivated arrests and killings, militarizing post-earthquake disaster relief. As you may remember, Haiti suffered a devastating earthquake in January 2010. And Canada has also been involved in preventing Haiti's most popular party, Famille Lavalas, the party of former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, from participating in elections. But surely, Canada the Good has been playing a positive role in Venezuela, where people are now recovering from 2 horrific back-to-back earthquakes on June 24th. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. The Canadian government supported the US military invasion and kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on January 3rd this year. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called the kidnapping and nighttime raid that left 100 dead welcome news. Also, despite the earthquakes that have killed over 5,000 now, I wrote 4,000 a couple of days ago, now the figure has gone up to 5,000. Despite the earthquakes that have killed over 5,000 to date, Canada refuses to remove its deadly sanctions on Venezuela and normalize diplomatic relations with Caracas. Instead, it has sent so far a paltry $5 million in humanitarian aid. Sanctions, as you probably well know, are war by other means, and according to researchers, US sanctions against Venezuela led to the death of 40,000 Venezuelans in 2017 and 2018 alone. All this because under Presidents Maduro and Hugo Chavez, the people of Venezuela are trying to build a country where housing, education, and a foreign policy free of US interference are the priorities, and the country's oil riches, which include the largest reserves of oil in the world, are under Venezuelan control. But Canada has also participated in or supported US-led regime operations elsewhere as well: Guatemala, Brazil, Paraguay, Dominican Republic, Honduras, and participated to a great extent in the murder of President Salvador Allende in Chile in 1973. Finally, what about Cuba, which is suffering major power failures at this time due to a total illegal blockade and threats of a military intervention by the Trump regime? As you probably know, in 1959, Fidel Castro's forces overthrew the imperialist-backed right-wing dictatorship of General Fulgencio Batista. While every country in the Americas severed ties with Cuba after the revolution, Canada, along with Mexico, maintained diplomatic and economic relations. This was undoubtedly for opportunistic reasons, allowing Canadian banks and businesses access to Cuba, while agreeing to spy on the country for Canada's pals in Washington. As a result, Canadian tourists in large numbers visit Cuba's warm beaches during Canada's long winter. My partner Marie and I have also visited this beautiful country with its friendly people and amazing music at least 3 times. But as usual, behind this friendly face, Canada constantly supports efforts to undermine the Cuban government. This includes Ottawa's endorsement of the US-backed invasion of Cuba to overthrow Castro's government in 1961, which turned into the unsuccessful Bay of Pigs fiasco. The Canadian government at that time called Castro's Cuba a dictatorship, which, and I quote, is abhorrent to free men everywhere. Canadian Airlines recently cut flights to Cuba, and the Canadian government is refusing to challenge the US blockade and come to the assistance of the Cuban people with any substantial oil and other necessities. In this short survey of Canada's role in the world, and particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, I've of course emphasized the negative impacts of Canadian imperialism, since myths about Canada the Good die very hard. But we must not forget that there are important struggles underway across Latin America and the Caribbean against imperialism. From the recent massive uprising of the peoples of Bolivia to the struggles in Argentina, Colombia, Haiti, Guatemala, and beyond. The other speakers today will be covering some of those struggles. Down with Canadian imperialism. Down with Yankee imperialism. Hasta la victoria siempre. Y viva la solidaridad internacional.
Long live international solidarity.
Que viva, que viva. Muchas gracias, Malcolm. Gracias por esa
Long live,
exposición sobre el rol de
long live
Canadá,
international
no
solidarity.
como un
Thank you so
actor
much,
menor,
Malcolm,
sino participando en
for that.
distintas guerras, sino
Um,
como un imperialismo ascendente y cómplice de los Estados Unidos. Destacó
Thank you so
Malcolm que
much
en
for
Canadá, a través de sus
your message
corporaciones mineras y energéticas, es
and the
uno de los mayores
discussion on the
acreedores de recursos
companies of
naturales en América
mining
Latina,
that are
operando
also
con
here in Latin
impunidad
America,
y bajo la
operating
protección
without
de
impunity
tratados de libres comercios que
with the
privilegian el
protection of these free
extractivismo.
trade
Su
agreements
intervención
that
subrayó que el gobierno
facilitate
canadiense es una pieza
these
clave del engranaje
negotiations.
imperialista global
It is
que
truly
despoja
a
a las
mark,
comunidades de sus tierras y
it is
agota los
truly an
bienes
important
naturales
mark
de la región. Muchísimas
of how
gracias,
they
Malcolm, por
plunder
tu
the country.
participación.
Thank
Invitamos
you so much for your
a los que
participation.
están
And now
presentes a
we
hacer sus
bring
preguntas para luego en el segmento de preguntas
we
y
welcome any
respuestas poder
questions that the
tener
audience
un
would like
poco
to
más de
share or
desarrollo de
other
las
comments.
respuestas
Please
y
send them in the
respuestas
chat. We will
participantes.
address them
Al
at
otro
the
lado de la
end of
frontera
our
de los
program.
Estados Unidos imperialistas se encuentra México, con una
And
economía
so the next
autónoma
speaker,
mayor
Mexico,
que la de la mayoría de Latinoamérica,
from Mexico,
pero aún sometido a los dictados del fascismo corolario de Trump. Ahora damos la bienvenida a
who
nuestra
will also be
compañera
speaking about the
Frida
corollary, the
González
Trump
Loyola,
corollary in
abogada y
Latin America,
militante
specifically
de
in
la
Mexico.
Unidad
We
Cívica
give the
San
welcome
Felipe
to
Carrillo Puerto
a
en
lawyer militant of
México,
the
que va a
Unión
tomar la
Cívica
palabra
Felipe
después de
Carrillo
nosotros.
Puerto,
Adelante, compañera Frida,
speaker
bienvenida.
Frida González Loyola.
Buenos días, ¿me pueden escuchar?
Sí,
Good
ahora
morning.
sí,
Can you
ahora
hear
sí,
us?
Frida, bienvenida, adelante.
Disculpas.
Yes, we can.
Si
Sorry.
podría, la recomendación del foro es si pueden
The
hablar
recommendation is
despacio para
to
que los
talk slower.
intérpretes puedan realizar bien su
The
trabajo y no tener
interpretation
ningún
can do
tipo de
their
divulgación
job
en otro
properly.
lugar. Muchas gracias, Frida.
Por supuesto, gracias.
Okay,
Bien,
perfect. Thank you.
un saludo desde Querétaro,
Greetings
México,
from
la Unidad Cívica
Querétaro,
Felipe
Mexico,
Carrillo Puerto.
from the civic unit,
La economía de guerra desplegada por las
the
potencias
war economy
imperialistas
deployed by
se ha
imperialist powers
profundizado y
is
despliega
deepening and
a
extending
territorios
into territories and nations
para
to
repartirse los
divide their
recursos
human
humanos
and
y
natural
materiales de
resources,
ellas, teniendo como
with
focos rojos por el momento
having
Ucrania y
specific
Oriente
targets,
Próximo.
Ukraine and the Middle East.
Recientemente, México
Recently,
destacó en el
Mexico
escenario
gained
mundial
global attention
debido al
due to the
Mundial de
2026
Fútbol
FIFA
celebrado
World Cup
y organizado por la FIFA este
hosted by
2026,
Mexico.
con sede en los países México,
The
Estados
United States
Unidos y
and
Canadá,
Canada.
lo cual en México generó un
This created
espacio
a space
para
in
la
Mexico for
visibilización
raising awareness
de las demandas
of the
sociales
social
y sociales
demands
de
of the
los
Mexican
México.
people.
Previo a la
Prior
inauguración
to
del
the World Cup
fútbol,
opening,
diferentes sectores
various sectors of the social
sociales
movement
salimos a
took to the
protestar en
streets
las
in
calles
protests
para
to
exigir
demand
la solución.
solutions.
Sin embargo, el Estado
However,
respondió con
the
una
state
política de
responded with a policy
descalificación
of
hacia las
dismissing
protestas
the
sociales.
protests.
Actualmente, México
Currently,
enfrenta
Mexico
algunas
faces
amenazas
threats from
de
Donald
Donald
Trump,
Trump con
including
declaraciones que van
statements
desde la imposición de
ranging from
aranceles a
imposing
las
tariffs on
importaciones
Mexican exports
mexicanas,
if immigration
con la finalidad
controls
esto si no se endurecía el control
on
de
our southern
migración
border are
en la
not tightened,
frontera sur, particularmente en el estado de Chiapas.
specifically in the state of Chiapas.
La ha amenazado también con la renegociación
It
del
has
TLC,
threatened with renegotiating the
con presión para
USMCA,
fortalecer la seguridad
pressuring for
fronteriza en la
stronger border
frontera,
security in the
el
north,
combate al
and a
tráfico de
crackdown
drogas,
on drug
como
trafficking,
la entrega de los
and
principales
demanding the
cárteles del
extradition of
narcotráfico.
major drug lords.
Todo ello sin el cese a
All
la
of this
venta de
comes without
armamento exclusivo
halting the
por parte
sale
del
of
ejército
weapons
de los
for the
Estados
exclusive
Unidos
use of the United
a los
States
cárteles de
military
la droga en
to
México.
drug cartels in Mexico.
Estas condiciones de
These
guerra
conditions of war
impuestas del
imposed by
capitalismo
capitalism
representan
represent
más explotación
further
y
exploitation
sacrificios para
and
las
sacrifices for
que
workers,
nos hacen pagar la
forcing
guerra y
us
sus
Mexicans,
mortales consecuencias
the
a
working
las y
class,
los
to
mexicanos
pay
que
for the war
conformamos la
and
clase
its deadly
trabajadora.
consequences.
Hoy en México,
Today
el
in
movimiento
Mexico,
social organizado,
organized
como
social
las
movements,
organizaciones sociales de
including
las
social
comunidades
organizations,
indígenas,
indigenous
grupos
communities,
ambientalistas,
and environmental
mantenemos
groups,
una lucha
face a
permanente
constant
ante
struggle in our territories
ante los
against
denominados
what are
proyectos
known
de
as
muerte.
projects of death,
Las grandes obras de
large
infraestructura
infrastructure
que buscan
projects
instalar
seeking to
el
establish
imperialismo
themselves
cubano han
in
generado
Mexican
una gran
territory.
devastación de recursos
These
naturales en
projects generate
México y
widespread
masión
devastation
de
of
agua,
natural resources,
de
such as the
ríos y
pollution
lagos,
of
que
rivers and
acarrea la
lakes,
devastación de
leading to
ecosistemas
ecosystem
y que
destruction
generan
and disease
enfermedades en las
in nearby
poblaciones
populations.
cercanas. Mediante el
They
discurso de
do this under the
desarrollo y
guise of
creación de
creating
empleo,
jobs.
algunos de ellos,
Some examples
por mencionar algunos,
include
son como el
the
tren
Maya
Maya,
train,
el corredor
the
interoceánico del istmo de
interoceanic corridor
Tehuantepec,
of
el
the
proyecto
Isthmus of
Integral
Tehuantepec,
Morelos,
the Morelos
la
Integral
minería a
Project,
cielo abierto,
open pit
la
mining,
creación de presas
and the construction
hidroeléctricas y
of
proyectos
hydroelectric
eléctricos,
dams and other
todos
energy
ellos y cada
projects.
uno destinados
Each
al
and every one
saqueo
of
de
these
los
projects
minerales y
is aimed
recursos
at
naturales
plundering the minerals
orgánicos
and
aún en
natural
nosotros
resources still available in our
y que
country,
generan contaminación
polluting the
en el espacio
environment
donde
where we
habitamos.
live,
Enfermedades
causing
causadas por la
illness
misma
and
contaminación
forcibly displacing
y el desplazamiento forzado
entire
de
communities.
comunidades enteras. Fundamentándonos
This is
en los
all based
indicadores
on economic
económicos
indicators.
actuales, el crecimiento del primer
First quarter
trimestre fue
growth
de
was
0.4%, una economía
0.4%,
muy
a stagnant
estacional
economy,
como reflejo del estado de la
reflecting the
economía
state of
mundial,
the global economy,
muy lejos del
far from the
objetivo que
government's
ganó
target
el
of
de tener un crecimiento del
4.5% growth.
4.5%. El estado de la
The
economía
state of the
nacional,
national
entre
economy
otros factores, se debe
is
a la
due,
débil
among other
inversión
factors,
como el
to weak
porcentaje del
investment
PIB,
as a percentage
porque
of
se han hecho
GDP,
anuncios con la
despite
economía
announcements
nacional de
made
nuestro
by the
país
national
en
lead
la
during the morning
mañanera,
press
de proyectos
conferences
de grandes
regarding
inversiones
major
sociales en el marco
investments
del Plan México,
projects
con la
under the
economía
Mexico
de
Plan.
guerra implementada por
With the war
Estados
economy
Unidos y
implemented
el
by the
mundo,
US globally,
con las guerras en
through
Oriente
the
Próximo
wars
y
in the Middle
Ucrania,
East and
el
Ukraine,
estancamiento económico
economic
afecta en
stagnation
principio a la
primarily
población
affects the
joven
young
y
workforce,
trabajo, porque el sistema
as the
actual
system
genera
becomes a
una máquina de
massive
pobreza.
poverty-generating
Si
machine.
a lo anterior sumamos que la
Furthermore,
inflación se ha aumentado
inflation has remained around
alrededor del
4% in
4%,
recent weeks,
siendo las
with
mercancías
consumer
preciadas
goods,
las
such as
que por
food,
encima de esta
exceeding
media,
this average.
como como son los alimentos. Regresando a
Returning to the
la
mobilization.
movilización en nuestro país, anterior a la inauguración
Prior
del
to the
Mundial
opening
de
of the
México
2026
2026
World
en
Cup in
México,
Mexico,
el sector
the
magisterial
teachers sector
inició una
launched
huelga
a
nacional
national strike
que persigue el
demanding
regreso
a
de un
return
sistema
to a
nacional de
fair and
solidaridad
equitable
y
pension
justa.
system.
También se hicieron visibles
Also
miles de
visible were
equipos
the
de
groups of
madres
searching
luchadoras,
mothers,
las cuales son
women who
mujeres con la
organized to
premisa de
travel
ir a
to
territorios donde
areas
creen que puede
where
haber
they
tráfico
believe
clandestino
clandestine
y en donde
graves may
buscan los
exist
restos de
and
sus
search
hijos,
for the remains of their children.
sin que obtuvieran
They received
respuesta
no
de la
response
presidenta,
from the
que
president,
incluso no las
who
ha
even
querido
refused to meet
esclavizar
with them,
públicamente,
publicly
de
accusing them of
hacerle el
playing
mano a la
into the
derecha,
hands of the right
expresión que
wing,
usamos en
an
México para
expression used in
referirnos
Mexico to
a jugar
refer
en un mismo
to
grupo.
being on the same team.
Pasada la coyuntura del Mundial y la
Now that the
época de
World
huelgas
Cup and the
nacionales,
national strike have
nuestra
passed,
tarea
our
es
task
perseguir el
is to
objetivo
pursue
central
the
de este
central
movimiento
objective of
social
the social
para unir
movement
todas las fuerzas
to
y
unite all
expresiones
popular
populares,
forces and
tanto las
expressions,
propias como las del
both our
conjunto
own
del
and those
movimiento de masas,
of the
para
broader
avanzar
mass
en la
movement,
tarea de
in order
construir
to
la
advance
Asamblea
the
Nacional
task of
de las
building the
sociedades
National
pobres y
Assembly
los pueblos de
of the
México.
working classes and the peoples
Tarea
of
que
Mexico.
nosotros desde nuestra
A task
organización
that
social,
we,
la
from our social
única Felipe
organization,
Carrillo Puerto,
the
hemos
UCFCP,
impulsado desde hace
have been
una
promoting for
década.
almost 4 decades.
Como Unidad Cívica Felipe Carrillo Puerto,
As the Felipe
desde
Carrillo
nuestra
Puerto Civic
integración
Unit,
a la
since our integration into
capítulo
the
México,
ILPS Mexico
hemos
chapter,
continuado con nuestras
we have
tareas de
continued our
diversas
work on
demandas
various
sociales,
social
que
demands,
incluyen el derecho a
including the
disponer
right
de la
to
tierra
land
para
ownership
trabajar
for
y para
work
habitar,
and housing,
a la libertad
and the
constitucional que
constitutional
tiene cada
freedom
persona para
of
trabajar,
every person to work,
adoptando así secciones
thus
de
bringing together
estudiantes,
trade
grupos
groups,
campesinos
peasants
y
groups,
grupos de
and
colonos
settler
que se
groups that
organizan
organize too.
para demandar al Estado en sus tres niveles de administración la atención a programas que nos permitan seguir mejorando la vida de nuestros militantes.
As we take this
Aprovechamos este
opportunity
espacio, compañeras y
with our
compañeros,
fellow listeners
para denunciar la
to
prohibición
denounce
que
the
han tenido
problems faced by
nuestros
our fellow
compañeros
farmers
campesinos en la
in the
comunidad
community
de
of El
Arce,
Charco in San Luis de La
municipio
Paz,
de San Luis de la Paz
in
y del distrito
Guanajuato,
Los Mochis,
Mexico.
quienes actualmente se
They
enfrentan
are
a un
currently
proceso
facing a
judicial
fraudulent
en el que
lawsuit
se les
that
pretende de
aims
manera
to
judicial
legally dispossess
despojarlos de
them
sus
of their
tierras.
land.
Asimismo, los
Similarly, the
campesinos del Rancho
farmers
Largo
of
de
El Rancho Largo de
Querétaro, México,
Quisquiapan in
quienes
Querétaro,
también se
Mexico,
enfrentan no solo al
are also
despojo de
facing
sus
not only
tierras,
dispossession
sino
by
que
a
tienen
wealthy
procesos
family,
que
but
pretenden
also legal
encarcelarlos
proceedings
para
that threaten
acabar
their
con su
imprisonment for
capacidad
living,
y trabajar
for
sin
living on
derechos,
and working their land.
siendo esto el síntoma
This
del
is a
llama
clear
llamada
symptom of the new
apropiación de las
appropriation of
tierras y
land
recursos
and natural
naturales en
resources in
México.
Mexico.
El pasado
Last
martes
Tuesday,
9 de julio del
July 9th,
2026, nos
2026,
reunimos como
we
Asociación
met as a
Política
civic
de Mujeres
association
del
based
Nacional
in the city
Querétaro
of
para
Querétaro
celebrar
to
nuestro
celebrate
39
our
aniversario y
39th
lucimos
anniversary,
ondeando
proudly
orgullosamente
displaying
nuestras
our
banderas de la paz.
ILPS flags.
Finalizamos
We end
entregándoles un saludo de
giving
nuestro
a warm
compañero
welcome
Pablo
from
González
our
Loyola, quienes
comrade
somos miembros del
Pablo,
ILPS desde el pasado
because
22
we
de
are
enero.
part of the
Un día de
ILPS
abril remoto, nombrados en Pinan George,
since
en
2024,
Suecia, como miembros del Comité de Coordinación
and we have been
Internacional para la
named
última Asamblea
um,
Internacional.
part
Muchas gracias por esta
of the
invitación.
organization committee for
Seguimos a
this
la orden.
seventh assembly. Thank you for the
Gracias,
invitation.
Frida. Gracias por esa
Thank you, Frida,
ponencia sobre la
for
situación
this
organizativa de la Felipe Carrillo Puerto
speaker
en
series
México y donde nos
and
haces un
all the
análisis
information where
precisamente
you give us an
de lo que
analysis
juega el
of
papel
the
del
extractivist
imperialismo
situations
yanqui en México,
that
pero también nos
that
haces un
imperialist
análisis sobre
Yankee imperialism has a
qué
play in
ocurre con la
Mexico.
realización del Mundial
You also
2026 en
give us
México,
some of
en la
the
Ciudad de
examples of
México y en
contradictions
partes
that
del
came
país, en
in
donde
the
se dan este
2026
tipo de
World Cup,
manifestaciones de
where we
distintas
see this type of
agrupaciones de familiares de
protests from different
desaparecidos,
sectors
desde el
of
movimiento
social
sindical de los
groups,
maestros, que
from
tuvo un gran impacto en
workers,
redes sociales,
teachers,
alertando
and that had a big
precisamente
impact
del
in social
impacto que
media
tenía el Mundial en México
um,
este 2026.
around this
Gracias
moment of
por
the
este contexto
2026
y
World
gracias
Cup.
por estar
Thank you so much
participando
for
aquí.
giving us
Con
this
esto
concept,
invito a
this
los y las participantes a que hagan sus
talk,
preguntas,
and
sus comentarios
we're
e
calling
intentaremos
participants
atenderlos y
to give
después
us
cerrar la partida.
questions in the
Gracias.
Q&A section, not right now, but thank you,
Muchas gracias,
Frida,
un
who
placer.
stayed with us.
Gracias, Frida.
Thank you, Samuel.
Para nuestro último orador,
For our next speaker, we invite a Richard Logo, charge of Venezuelan the Venezuelan embassy in the Philippines, to take the floor and speak about the conditions of Venezuela, the epicenter of U.S. imperialist attacks under this fascist Trump regime. We want to give also all our solidarity to our colleague after the catastrophe that happened in Venezuela that caused great destruction there.
Muchas gracias, Samuel. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. And for the people of the Western Hemisphere, good evening for all the comrades here in this area, Southeast Asia, Africa, Europe. Well, I'll start my presentation with, I don't know if it's possible to put this, the presentation by PowerPoint. It's possible to put it? Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart the ILPS for allowing this space of thought, of consideration of these issues, the anti-imperialist struggle that we're living in the Western Hemisphere. Now, let's start with this. Venezuelan revolution under siege. Now it's not under attack. It's a stage of siege that we see not only in Venezuela, in the whole Western Hemisphere. This is what I call the socialist struggle against the U.S. war machine. And now we can learn a lesson on realpolitik concerning the blatant attack that we have received in Venezuela for many years since the infamous decree of the Obama administration in 2015 until now, until July 2026. This is, for one side, this is something that we have faced in Venezuela, that we have in some way struggled, but at the same time, and that's important to know, important to realize, it's so many years, I would say more than a generation of people of the growing and the basement of real struggle and the consciousness of the people. So we have lived this for 27 years now, for 27 years in Venezuela. And this is where we can attest that the revolution, it's within our society, it's deep inside our society. Please, next slide. And that's the person. Those are, I would like to talk about the challenge for the Bolivarian and socialist Venezuela facing the application of this Don't Road doctrine in the Western Hemisphere. Now, Venezuela has changed. Venezuela changed almost a generation back. We changed in the 80s, middle 80s, the consciousness of the people, the struggle and the disruption of the classes in Venezuela, of the social classes in Venezuela, made, form, and create the socialist and Bolivarian Venezuela we live in. These two people, these two persons, the President Chavez, Commander Chavez, and President Maduro, defined and shaped what is Venezuela now, concerning the struggle, concerning the path to the socialism and concerning the path of progress in Venezuela. Now we have to face, and we are facing, the the opposition of this path that we have lived for more than a generation now. Now we are in the middle of this war. It's a hybrid war. It's a multi-phase war that we are living, and we are, of course, trying to face it. Third slide, please. So, yes, even though I'm not going to focus the presentation in the background of the situation, nevertheless, I'm going to speak a little bit about it because we have to give some content and some content to the current situation we have. There is, or as I said previously, this vision in the 21st century, the Bolivarian thought that was shaped during the whole 20th century, from in our 19th years in Venezuela. The 20th century was a mix of social struggle, of economic progressive development, but also a clash between in social classes there, a clash there. That shaped the revolution, and we started this 21st century with this revolution made and created the inception of this by Hugo Chavez and followed by Nicolas Maduro. Then the second item that you see there, it's very interesting and the key element of this struggle that we're having. The national plans, we call the national plans the plans we make within the government for 5 years to do and to perform at the different levels in different sectors: education, housing, food sovereignty, foreign policy, and many others. Those national plans were shaped every 5 years with the aim of strengthening the popular power, the communal power. That was the idea the whole time, that the people has to have the power. There will be, of course, from the current society paradigm, let's say, representatives like the president, like the parliament, like the other regional representative, mayors, governors, but the people have to have and had to have the power to do everything. This is the key. Once we shaped and started with the revolution, the very first thing that Hugo Chavez did was empower the people to do and to run, to manage the country in housing, with the productive sector, with healthcare in this case, and that's that's a key feature that I will see afterwards. Of course, at that time we're talking the beginning of this century. They were, and you can see it there, the photographs in the presentation in the slide, the alliance in the Western Hemisphere against the U.S. political and military power, represented by Bush Jr., Obama, Trump, Biden, and now Trump. Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, all together defining the fate of of South America, of the whole Latin America, creating, as I said, the architecture in our hemisphere, in our continent, and with some view of socialism and, very important, anti-imperialist sense. That's why we created CELAC. We created, I mean, when I say we, it's the whole Latin America, not Venezuela. The whole Latin America created CELAC, ALBA, TCP, PetroCaribe, and UNASUR. And this was, or this has been, the paradigm that Venezuela and many countries from Latin America took at that time and that were following this path until now. Next slide, please. And now we see what comes. We knew that this struggle, or this fight, this battle, and this war against the US imperialist forces would go to would see and would form into a bigger struggle with what had happened since 2015, with the inception of the economic sanctions, political sanctions, and diplomatic, of course, and until last year that we saw the blatant attack and blockade, not only against Venezuela, but against the many countries in South America, with the so-called war against drugs in the Caribbean. And we saw the situation that was formed after the kidnapping of President Maduro. We have seen a breach of rules of engagement, a breach of rules of security and international law in the Western Hemisphere, mainly in the Western Hemisphere. But we see all over the world the same trend. We see how now the lawfare that we are suffering all over, not only Venezuela, but anywhere. We have seen the same path in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in the whole subcontinent of South America. We see the path of the complete disregard for the international law under the disguise of containing, in the case of drugs, or some drug smuggler. We saw what happened in the Caribbean under the disguise of defending democracy. We saw the blatant attack and the kidnapping of our presidential couple, the constitutional president Nicolas Maduro, and the First Lady Celia Flores. We saw that everything, as the previous speaker said, our comrade Malcolm said that, and Samuel, everything had to do with the national security guidelines from the national security of November 2025, where they shaped this Trump Corollary. They shaped and they define the inception of this Trump on Don't Road doctrine, that the Americas, in plural, the Americas belong or would be a legal backyard of the United States. Of course, We saw that. We saw the impunity in the invasion of Venezuela, of the presidential kidnapping, the warfare, the black propaganda we have been receiving since many years, not only in Venezuela, elsewhere. We have heard the worst of the black propaganda in Cuba, in Mexico, in Nicaragua, and the whole Central America, in Venezuela, Chile, Colombia. And that in some way resent the anti-imperialist forces and resent the national liberation forces in the whole hemisphere. The reaction from our allies that will be our allies, let's say forever, Iran, China, Russia, was in some way of, to my view, of some respect for the rules of engagement, like they declare, the U.S. imperialist forces declare the Western Hemisphere as theirs, and it's in some way quite impossible to meddle into the situation there. That's my view, my personal view, of course. But that's the way many Venezuelans felt about that, about the impunity towards the kidnapping of our president, and what we're seeing today, precisely. Today, it is the second audience, the second hearing of the federal court in New York, and we don't think that there will be a positive outcome, since we know that this is a political decision. This has been just a decision from the warmongering regime there, and that has nothing to do with law and order in the Western Hemisphere, unless with the international law. And we are seeing real time the plundering of Venezuelan natural resources, the productive resources there in Venezuela, and of course, we need to do something about that. But that came, as Samuel just said, the devastating double earthquake that we just saw and suffered almost 1 month ago. And all of us, we have seen the receipt of the international aid where, and I have to say it, the U.S. war machine has intervened, not only in the U.S., the Zionist entity forces and some more forces have entered with the disguise of international aid. And we know what comes when this type of regime forces come. It's quite hard for us in this weak situation, because we have to recognize it, how to deal with this. So that comes in the next slide. Yes, the Bolivarian response. Now we have to bear in mind that there are different levels applying in Venezuela for the response, for the answers, and for the interaction with other countries. Because we have to bear in mind that Venezuela is not a country where the representative people, or I would say the elite, might or might not be detached from the civil society for the people. It's in Venezuela, it's all the same. The people, the grassroots people, the grassroots classes have to do with the decision that the country makes. And that's what's happening. Now, what we're seeing in this is we are stressing the need of the request of the lifting of sanctions against Venezuela to all the things. This is something that we are in some way pushing and fostering and hoping to be reality very soon. Now, and that's the second part. It's a little bit contradictory and polemic. Is that we have seen withdrawal at the high level. Let's say the presidency, the interim presidency, the political factors to counter the black propaganda we see about the invasion, about the new rule of the opposition forces. We have seen that. And they are in some way trying to avoid that. But at the same time, we are feeling the popular discontent through our communal power leaders with our the cells of the progressive forces in Venezuela against the neo-colonial attempt from the United States to rule Venezuela in the future. We are trying to avoid that, and that's the main objective, the main focus that we have there in Venezuela. And of course, the third one is the rejection of the imperialist opposition, namely Maria Corina Machado, namely all the anti-democratic opposition, and namely what we saw, I think a few days back, that some representatives from the former Congress, the former parliament from 2015, where United States regime gave the power to rule and to manage the assets, especially in oil, from Venezuela in the U.S. Now they are coming to Venezuela, but as interim president Delcy Rodriguez said precisely last night, she said, I'm going to talk to them once the United States regime lifts the sanction. Once they lift the sanction, then we can talk and we can give some space to the dialogue with anti-imperialist forces there, precisely from the opposition. But we cannot be blind to the strength of the imperialist forces and the strength of the imperialist propaganda that we are receiving in Venezuela. And that's where the next slide comes. Those are the problems that we see for the revolution now. First, due to the blockade, we have, in some way, we are ceding strategic space in Venezuela concerning the oil, concerning the gas. Those are the main natural resources where we are so productive. To give you an idea, we are producing and exporting 1 million barrels a day of oil. Those are 1 million, according to our basket, let's say the degrees, AP degrees, and the heaviness of our national oil, it's about $60. That means that $60 million per day had been produced in Venezuela only with oil, not with agriculture, not with the industry, but only with oil. That means 21, almost $22 billion a year. That's the, let's say, the productive sector where we have the most income, let's say in Venezuela. And we are, and that's the second part, we are ceding those space and opening up the Venezuelan oil economy for the Western warmongering in order to contain the plunder. But it's a problem that we are having now. As you have read and seen, there is a shady account, personal account by Donald Trump, who is running the military, the personal level, in order to get and snatch the income from those oil production, also for the gas production. And then we are getting, I have to say it bluntly, comrades, we are getting crumbs from that. As I said, only in we are getting 22 million. That mean billion. That means 11 billion from January 3 till June 30th. Let's say one semester. From those 11 billion, we have seen only less than 1 billion. Just imagine that for not only for the humiliation in terms of power and economic power, but to serve the needs of the Venezuelan there, including the June 24 earthquake. This is the situation that we're living in Venezuela, and there is no way to blind us or to cover up this situation. And of course, the problem that we have, the third one that we are seeing in Venezuela, is that we are receiving a lot of pressure to in some way, to put a framework to set the basis to give an idea of an open economy, of an open democracy. That's why they are pushing for this amnesty law, where they are pardoning people who attempted against the Venezuelan law and order, who attempted against the peace of Venezuela during, we're talking 27 years and even beyond. We remember in Venezuela what happened with our Attorney General, who was was killed by terrorists in a cart with a car bomb. That was a real revolutionary person who died, and those are the people who wanted to get pardoned by this amnesty law. Now we are having this dialogue with the opposition, and according to the last development, especially with this the consequence of the earthquake, rapprochement with imperialist agents, and those are the problems we're facing, and we have to see how to overcome all this. And that comes our next slide. Yes, those are the challenges we have. And those are the strategic measures that we are taking in Venezuela. With all the problems, with all the situations that we see, those are the challenges that we have. And I wouldn't say even challenge, but the objectives that we may have, that we do have there. First one, as I say, people's power as the driving force of the resistance in Venezuela, inside Venezuela, within Venezuela, and of course elsewhere. But the popular power the communal power as a core factor in Venezuela, this is what we are looking for. Because as you see, representatives, diplomats, high-level government might want to give an idea, of course, because we have to do it, of a sense of order and a sense of compliance with what we're suffering now. But in the essence, we are pushing and working together along with the communal power to be the force in the resistance there with all what is happening there in Venezuela. Now, the second objective is the continuation of the alliance of the left in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, along with Mexico, we are in some way resistant, but we cannot forget this is a war. This is a big war, and we cannot be either defeated or left out because of some battles that we might lose. So, for instance, we have to keep encouraging the resistance movement in Latin America, just like we're doing it in Colombia, in Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, Argentina. Just imagine, comrades, just imagine that because of the new government as took power, the right-wing government took power in Bolivia, then we're going to leave all our comrades, all our struggling forces there behind. No, it's not possible. It's not possible to do that. And that's why this type of space like ILPS has created, it's so important in order not only to create awareness of what's happening in Venezuela, but how to deal, how to cope with this situation, and how to overcome this situation. And also at the international level, we have to get this position, decisive position of the Bolivarian and Chavista Venezuela in the face of the multilateral and multipolar world vision. What happened in January 3, what happened with us in June 24 have been big setbacks. But we cannot either deny or distrust our allies. Because of that, we know, and well, Comrade Malcolm said perfectly, it's a new paradigm that we are seeing in the Western Hemisphere, not only with the US regime, aid by the Zionist entity, but also with the Canadian regime. We are seeing that they try to shape from the G7 in the economical level, and in some more levels and ways, they are trying to keep us in a weak position in some way a different level of interaction, but we can do something about that. And to my view, and that's why I put at the last point, the performance of the United Nations, we can do it. We can take the advantage of our community. When I say our community, it's the whole community, not only the Western Hemisphere, not only Latin American struggling forces, but the whole system of the United Nations in order to raise our voice, just like we have done it with Cuba, we have done it with Lebanon, we have done it with our beloved Gaza in Palestine, and many other places where we have seen either high or even low intensity warfare from the US and warmongering forces. And the last slide, please. It's the resume and all what I have said. Venezuela is not only President Maduro, and that's why we keep pushing. Venezuela is not only the Chavista elite, that there has been a consciousness, the growth of a consciousness, of popular consciousness, for 27 years already. It's a generation formed in the socialist path, in the communist way, and we are prepared morally and intellectually and with the heart to do the work. That's why we say we are all Chavez. Even it's some, and that's what I want to assure you, comrade. If one person, if one representative from the Chavista government decide or might go away from the path that all of us have decided previously, of course, the people will impose themselves. The people will do it. That's why there is no way for us in Venezuela to be from any other way than the socialist path. We are socialists, will keep being socialists, and even if we might lose battles, we are not going to win, and we're not going to lose the war overall. And that's why, comrades, for the last thought I want to say, we, in some way, from overseas, from the international order, we need your support. We need the support of progressive forces. We need the support of many people in order to create consciousness. Because sometimes, and I have to say honestly, sometimes we have our doubts, not because we don't believe in the revolution, not. It's because we don't feel sometimes that we are enough to keep on. But with you, with the not only the strength, but the willingness that you give us, we keep on working, we keep on struggling. That's why I suggest in this presentation to please, let's try to convene an ILPS chapter in Venezuela in order to keep on the struggle. So thank you very much, comrade, and viva la revolución venezolana, viva Chávez, viva Bolívar, viva Maduro.
Long live the Bolivarian Revolution, long live Chavez, and long live Maduro.
Que viva. Muchas gracias, compañero Richard Lobo.
Thank you so much, Comrade Richard Lobo, for explaining the critical situation of Venezuela, of the different attacks by the imperialists in currently, the different economic and political sanctions that form part of this strategy to strangle the country and to overturn the Bolivarian Revolution, despite that the Venezuelan people have been able to put a stop to fight against these attacks, to bring down their government and attack the people. Thank you so much, Richard Lobo. And we will combine efforts with you to realize, to create a ILPS Venezuela chapter. And so we will continue into the next part of our program of the Q&A section. I believe there may be some questions that have been raised to our speakers.
Para poder solicitar la palabra y se les activará su micrófono. Y por el momento entraremos, que seamos muy breves y muy concisos en nuestras preguntas.
Maybe please
por
be
supuesto
very
también
brief
en
and
nuestras
direct,
respuestas, dado
concise with our
el tiempo que nos
questions
queda.
from the
Nuestro debate
audience,
puede ampliarse
so we can
muchísimo
maximize the time that we have
muchísimo
remaining.
tiempo, pero bueno,
We do
estaremos,
appreciate, of
contamos
course,
con nuestro tiempo
wanting to have
elevado.
people
Tengo por
and our
acá una
speakers to have
pregunta,
enough time to
bueno,
give the
en realidad son
responses
dos
and our.
preguntas que las
We
voy a
currently have
unificar
two
para que la
questions.
compañera Frida tenga la oportunidad de
I will
desarrollar su
speak them
respuesta en base
in
a esto.
Spanish
Y
so that
dice
our
que
speaker in
la
Spanish
pregunta es, ¿qué respuestas
um,
dio la presidenta
can respond.
Sheinbaum a
Number
las
one, is it
acciones de
fair
las
to say that
manifestaciones de los
Sheinbaum
maestros y de
is
los
to Mexico what
desaparecidos
Zelensky is to
durante el
Ukraine?
Mundial? Si logró ser
Um,
escuchado el movimiento social
Given
o
what they were
simplemente
saying
no
about
fue atendido.
how the
Y si
teachers
es
and the mothers of
justo
the
decir
disappeared were
que la
treated.
presidenta Sheinbaum es para México lo que Zelensky es
Oh,
para
I
Ucrania,
misplaced the question. Sorry.
la herramienta y la
Is it fair
fachada
to
del
say that
imperio.
Sheinbaum is to Mexico what Zelensky is to Ukraine,
Oceanista.
the tool and
Adelante,
cover for
Frida, te
Zionist
dejamos con estas
imperialism?
dos preguntas para que puedas responderlas. Si puedes encender tu cámara y tu audio. Gracias. Frida. Gracias, Frida.
Bien, ¿sí me escuchó?
Sí, ahora sí.
Can you hear me?
Gracias.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Bien, a la pregunta, compañeros, creo que Claudia Sheinbaum no puede
To the
ser
question,
comparada
I believe that
en este
Claudia
momento
Sheinbaum
con
cannot be
Zelensky
compared with
o con
Zelensky
cualquier otro gobierno que esté
or with
totalmente
any other
controlado
government that
por
can be totally
Donald
controlled
Trump.
by Donald
Sin
Trump.
embargo, ha tenido que
However,
saber
um,
sortear
she
amenazas,
has
¿no?
to been able
Amenazas
to handle
muy
threats,
directas de las
really direct
que
threats
incluso se
that
atrevió a
um,
mencionar el presidente de
when
Estados Unidos que la
when Donald
presidenta de
Trump
México era una
even
mujer muy
mentioned
asustada.
that to the president of
Al mismo
Mexico, she
tiempo,
was
en
a
el
really
territorio mexicano,
fearful
algunas
woman.
operaciones
We have discovered
de
in
la
the
CIA
Mexico
y la DEA,
territory some
incluso está
operations of the CIA and
un
the
procedimiento en contra de
DEA,
una gobernadora de la frontera de México
even a procedure
para
against
tratar de
one of
llevarla
the
a juicio
governments,
político,
one of a
ya que
governor
ha
in
permitido,
Mexico
sin el
trying
consentimiento
to
del
have a
gobierno
political
federal, que ingresen operativos de la CIA y
trial
la DEA a nuestro
because
territorio.
she has allowed
Entonces,
agents
digamos
from
que ha habido
the
una
CIA to
política
enter
de
the
la
territory.
derecha para
So there
tratar
has been
de
some policy from the
hacer
right to try
jugar en contra
um, to
del oficial gobierno federal en México.
to
Sin
go
embargo,
against the
parece
official
que la
government right now.
presidenta aún
However, the president still
conserva una
um,
representación democrática
can have
que
still
tiene
has some
todavía
democratic
el
representation
visto
that still has
un
some of
sector del pueblo. Sin embargo, sí hay que
the
notar
support
que
of
le
a
molestó
sector
mucho
of
y
the
creo que lo
people.
tomó de manera personal
However, we have to note that
las
she
protestas que se
got
iniciaron
like
previas al mundial, que cabe
took really
mencionar que
personally
no iniciaron
the
como
protests
oportunistamente durante la etapa
in
del mundial,
in
sino
the
que la
World
Coordinadora
Cup.
Nacional de
It's just to
Trabajadores de
know
la
that
Educación, que es el
this
magisterio,
the protests didn't
y
begin
también otras
opportunistically during
trabajadoras
the
que han
World Cup.
movilizado durante
It's just that
años,
the teachers and
solicitando esta
the
solución a sus
searching
demandas.
mothers have been mobilizing for years.
Particularmente a las madres
Um,
buscadoras no les dio respuesta
Specifically,
y ella
the
sostiene públicamente,
searching
y hay un
mothers,
sector
they
de
didn't
las
receive any
madres
response.
buscadoras
She
que
still
tiene nexos
says that there's
incluso
a
con uno
sector
de
of
los
these
cárteles
of
mexicanos,
um,
y las otras
searching
están
mothers
financiadas
that have
por,
some relations with drug cartels or that are
por la
financed
derecha, es decir, los
by the
partidos de derecha conservadora aquí
right
en
wing
México,
parties here
lo
in
cual
Mexico,
creo
which
particularmente
I
que es
believe
injusto que
personally that
se
it's unjust
considere a
that
todas
you
las
could
víctimas de
be
desapariciones
considered victims
forzadas
of
como un movimiento
forced
totalmente
disappearance as a
político de
whole movement
derecha,
that is just
porque hay
a right
muchas
wing
personas que sí
political
están buscando
movement
a sus
when
familiares en
there are
nuestro
actual
país,
people that are
y que
looking
bueno, es
for
una lástima que
their
no se
family
presten
members in the countries,
a este tipo
and
de
it's a shame
declaraciones.
that
No
the
las
president
entiendo y
is
no les he
giving this type
cuestionado.
of declarations, and she
Sería la
received
respuesta.
kind of
Muchísimas
blames, but she
gracias,
didn't
Frida.
respond.
Gracias por
That
tu
would be my
respuesta.
response.
Vamos a ir a la
Thank you,
siguiente
Frida,
pregunta que
for
está dirigida para el
um,
compañero Lobo.
question. We're gonna have
¿Cuáles son
our
las
second question that
opiniones y el
is
sentir de los
for our
movimientos sociales en
comrade Lobo.
Venezuela? ¿Existe
what are the public opinion, sentiments,
La
and
pregunta
movements
es,
in
¿existen pero
Venezuela?
no son
Do
reportados?
they
Hay otra
exist, but
pregunta que nos han
they're not
enviado que
reported by the
dice,
mainstream
en este
corporate
momento de
media?
crisis,
And then there's another one in
en este
this
momento de crisis en
moment of
Venezuela por el
crisis in
terremoto,
Venezuela
¿de qué manera
because of the earthquake. In what
podemos
ways,
ayudar y apoyar
in what way
aún
can we
más?
help and support even more?
Gracias,
Thank you,
Samuel.
Samuel.
Bueno, lo siguiente,
So two things
dos
I want to
preguntas.
say, the two questions.
¿Qué se puede hacer
Um,
primero
First,
con
what can we
respecto
do in respect to the earthquake
al grave terremoto y las
uh,
circunstancias
be-
que están pasando
and all the circumstances
en
around it?
Venezuela? Primero, por
First,
supuesto, ayudar directamente a las
to help
víctimas
directly the victims
del terremoto.
of the earthquake.
Es una región
It's a region that is, or
sumamente
has been a
poblada.
region that is incredibly populated.
Es difícil,
It is difficult
porque el
because
60%
the
de la
60%
población,
of the
muchos de nuestros
population,
compañeros
most
han
of
estado
our teammates have been there,
son de esa zona costera, de
are
esa
from that
parte.
coastal region.
En lo particular, yo perdí a
In
4
particular,
miembros
I
de mi
lost
familia
4 family
porque
members
fue masiva
because it was massive.
el terremoto. No
The earthquake
solamente
was
como
massive.
dijo Malcolm,
Not only how Malcolm
5.000
referenced
personas,
5,000 people,
sino se
but
teme que haya
we think
unas
that
20.000
it might
personas
be
desaparecidas, que
20,000
eso podría
missing
llegar
people.
a 25,
And that could
26.000
go into 25,
fallecidos. Es
26,000
realmente
um,
impresionante y
people that have
bueno,
died, and
lo
it's
que se
really
pueda ayudar desde el punto de
crazy.
vista
And how,
de
whatever you can help
instituciones, desde el punto de
in terms
vista
of institutions
de, de alivio de
or
las
any
heridas.
aid that can be for or
Con
treatment
respecto a la
of
primera pregunta, ¿cuál
wounds.
era, Samuel?
What was the question again in response to the first
Sí,
question?
muchas gracias, compañero Lobo. La primera
Yeah,
pregunta era
thank you,
si existen,
Comrade
cuáles
Lobo.
son las
The first question
opiniones, el
is,
sentir
what are
de los
the
movimientos sociales
the
en Venezuela,
opinions,
si
the sentiment
efectivamente
of
existen,
social movements in
si
Venezuela,
existen,
if they
pero probablemente
exist,
tal vez no son
um, and
de
and if they
Venezuela
exist,
por
like
la hegemonía de
why they
los
don't like
medios de comunicación
go
global, ¿no?
abroad? Is it
Que
because of
tiene
this like
mucho que
hegemony
ver
of
con
mainstream media?
la última,
It has to do a
el
lot
último slide que puse de la
with the last
presentación.
slide that I was presenting.
We are in
Uh,
the
we are
situation of wait and see. Eso es
we are
principalmente lo que hay.
that's
Esperar,
mainly where
ver qué
we're
es lo que
waiting
pasa, cómo
and
es la
seeing
respuesta
what is the
oficial de
response, what is the
nuestros
official
líderes, de
response
nuestra
of our
cúpula,
leaders, of our
del
elites,
Comité Central del
of the
Partido
Central
Socialista,
Committee, of the
a
Socialist
ver
Committee,
hasta
to
dónde
see
llega
where
esta necesidad de
until when do we see
acuerdo, esta necesidad
this
y esta
necessity
presión
of
de acuerdo
uh,
para ver.
uh,
Pero en
like
cualquier
this pressure
momento, como lo
of
dije
having
y lo enfaticé,
accords.
la revolución
And
venezolana
how
es
I
del pueblo,
emphasized
es de las
the
personas.
Venezuelan revolution is of the
Los
people.
líderes
Of
solo son representantes
the
de
leaders are only
ese sentir
representatives
popular.
of
Eso es
that
importantísimo
popular
saberlo. No es
sentiment.
que,
That is
como
really
vamos a
important to
decir,
know. It is not
lamentablemente cambiaron la cúpula y ya
like the
hubo un
case in other
movimiento,
countries where they change,
ya
like
las
the elite,
personas se quedaron ya
and then
tranquilas
people,
y no
the
hay
people just stayed
de alguna
calmed
manera una respuesta popular.
and they
Eso no
didn't
puede
really
pasar en
respond.
Venezuela y
So
no
they
va a
have
pasar.
a popular
No va a
response to
pasar.
that.
Ya
That can't happen
una
in Venezuela, and
generación
that won't
como
happen.
Cuba tiene ya
That's we have a
5
generation
3
like Cuba that has like
generaciones de lucha
you know
popular,
three generations
de un cambio
social
socialista.
and
Eso lo
popular
tiene
struggle
Cuba, eso
of
lo
a
está teniendo
socialist
Venezuela.
past
Venezuela ya va
that Cuba has it.
comenzando una
We're
segunda
also having
generación,
that
de
in Venezuela.
personas
We're starting a
formadas
second generation
bajo
of people that have
principios
been
socialistas y
taught
no va a cambiar.
under
Eso es importante, por
socialist
eso que
principles, and
sigue
that won't
siendo
change, and that's
importante
important.
no
It is still
solamente la
important
ayuda, no
um,
solamente entender,
to know that it's not only like having support or understanding, but having cooperation with grassroots groups in Venezuela and with their leaders, with diplomats, with the high government, with the Congress and Parliament. It's important to have that, yes, but without leaving to the side the contact with the grassroots movements. I can give a testimony to this. We have a comrade in the Philippines that is working. She traveled the day of the earthquake. She wasn't able to come here. She arrived 2 days later. But right now, she's working with grassroots movements and people to see the popular sentiment and seeing the response that we're having against the imperialist threat that is over
Perfecto, muchas
Venezuela right now.
gracias, compañero Lobo.
Thank you very much,
Definitivamente nuestra
Comrade Lobo.
solidaridad con la pérdida
Definitely
de
our
tu
solidarity
familia.
with, your
Una
family.
enormidad
It is a great
de ayuda y de
pain for
solidaridad de
us,
nosotros, ¿no?
clearly,
Abrazo
and
muy
of
fuerte y
the
gracias
Venezuelan
por
people,
compartirlo
and,
con
a
nosotros.
great hug, and thank you for sharing with
La
us.
otra pregunta es una pregunta
The
para
other
México y
question
Venezuela.
is
Ustedes pueden
a
contestar
question
de
for
la
both
manera
Mexico
que
and Venezuela.
consideren.
You guys can answer
¿Existen
as you
actividades
desire.
antiimperialistas
Are there
reales,
real,
no
not symbolic,
simbólicas,
effective, and sustained
efectivas y sostenidas sobre
counter-imperialist
el terreno
activities
en
on the
México y
ground
Venezuela
in
que
Mexico and
cuenten con el
Venezuela
apoyo
and
de
are supported
Rusia
by
o
Russia or
China,
China
más allá del
beyond
comercio
usual trades
habitual y
and
las entregas
one-time
puntuales de
humanitarian
ayuda
aid
humanitaria?
deliveries?
Si quieres, Frida,
If you
empezar y
want,
tal
Frida,
vez
you can
terminamos con
start, and then we can
compañero Richard.
finish uh, with our comrade Richard.
O compañero Richard, ¿quieres empezar?
Sí, sí, claro. Sí,
Yeah, of
hay
course.
esos trabajos de base que se están haciendo
There are a
con
lot of those
grupos
like kind of work at the
solidarios,
grassroots level
grupos
with
revolucionarios en Venezuela.
solidarity groups and
Em,
revolutionary
Hay
groups.
algo que es muy particular en Venezuela. Digo muy particular no porque sea único
There's something really
en el
particular in
mundo,
Venezuela,
sino
not
que
it's not because
define
it's unique in
a
Venezuela or like unique in the
el
world, but
camino
because it
socialista, que
defines
es
the
los
socialist
grupos
path
o consejos
in
comunitarios.
Venezuela.
Ellos siguen
And it's
trabajando
the
desde
communal councils.
antes, desde
They
después
keep
del 3 de
working
enero, e
um,
igual desde
from before
antes y
and
después del
after
24
the
de junio.
3rd of January
Sigue
and before and
trabajando
after the
los
24th
grupos
of
comunales,
June.
los consejos
Community
comunales
councils keep
son
working.
los que
They're a group
distribuyen
that
comida,
those are the groups that
distribuyen
distribute food,
todo lo que es la parte de la
that
logística.
distribute all
Ellos,
like
a
the
ellos
managed
es que el
logistics.
alto
Um,
gobierno
those
consulta para lo que estaban haciendo ahorita.
the high government
Cuando
is
no pueden
consults
comprar
directly to the communal
muchos
councils to know the path forward.
damnificados o homeless
Many of the
en
victims,
Venezuela
a lot of the
porque
people that
las casas se
were
cayeron,
homeless,
las casas,
now
edificios se
after
cayeron,
the houses
cerca
and
de 1000
buildings have
edificios
fell,
en toda la región
around
se cayeron.
1,000
Imagínense 1000
buildings
edificios
have been
con
that fell
100 o 200
across the
apartamentos.
region.
Así es la situación.
Buildings with like
Y
100 to
los
200
grupos, los consejos
flats.
comunales
But
son los
these community
encargados
councils
de
are the ones in
hacer las
charge
listas
of
de
making
quién
lists,
necesita casas y quién
of
necesita
who
atención
needs
médica,
houses, who needs
quién necesita
medical
ayuda
assistance,
para
who
que
needs
el
help,
gobierno proceda a hacer.
um,
Eso es un
so that
poco lo que se
the
está
government
trabajando ahí.
can
Se están
can
haciendo
respond. That's a
censos, se
little
están
bit of
haciendo
that.
trabajos.
The
Ya
work they're doing census
se
um,
está
to
trabajando desde ya. De hecho,
yeah, they're working at that level.
una anécdota solidaria
I will also share
dentro de este
like an anecdote.
mare magnum, dentro de esta arremetida de
In
la
this whole situation
desinformación y
um,
propaganda
of
mala,
like the disinformation and
que
propaganda and
el 2%,
that
2%
2%
solamente
um,
de los edificios que se
and
cayeron
only 2% of the
eran los
buildings
construidos por
were the ones
Bielorrusia,
built by
por Vietnam, por
Belarus
Irán,
by Vietnam, by
hechos
Iran,
por el gobierno en
made by
concierto
the
con
government, but
nuestros aliados.
with
Solamente el
the help
2%.
of those
Los
allies.
98%
Uh, so yeah, it was only 2% that actually fell, but the 98% of the ones that fell were private from 80 from in the 90s and 80s. We're still trying to work with allies. Maybe in a way that's a little bit timid. And like, the public speech, all of our Venezuelans were happy when we saw finally the beginning of humanitarian aid from Iran, Russia, and China. Okay, we're not just in the hands of imperialist forces, but we also have other friends and allies that can help us. Even not only from the governments, the people directly are the ones that are participating and are supporting and are the ones that are working really. And that's a little bit of what I can say in respect to Venezuela. And, Latin America, Bolivia is going through the same, Ecuador, even when there are right-wing governments, the people are the ones doing the work for the progress of the country.
Muchísimas gracias, compañero Richard.
Thank you so much,
Si
comrade
quieres
Richa.
finalizar con este segmento de preguntas y
Frida, if you want to
respuestas muy
finish
puntual,
with the
comenzaremos
segment
entonces
of
creando
Q&A,
un punto. Muchas
Claro,
gracias, adelante.
to make sure that we want
sobre
to
la pregunta,
punctual. Yeah.
sí
In
hay
terms of the question,
organizaciones y
we do have
agrupaciones
organizations and groups,
sociales,
social,
activistas, que
groups and
han
activists
impulsado
that have
protestas aquí en el
pushed
territorio mexicano, en la
and
Embajada de
supported
Estados Unidos, que
protests
exigen el cese
in the
a
U.S.
la
embassy here in
intervención en la
Mexico.
franja de Gaza, el
That
cese a la guerra,
that
pero
are demanding
ciertamente
a
no
ceasefire in
sabemos,
Gaza, the end
no
of
son,
the
o
war,
más bien lo que
but
sabemos es que no son
we
impulsadas o apoyadas
don't really know.
ninguno de
All we
los
know
bloques económicos que
is
mencionaban
that
sobre
they're not
China o
usually
Rusia,
like
sino que
helped
son
directly by any of
expresiones
those
muy
countries like that were
particulares de
mentioned, like
México
China and
y
Russia,
del
but
movimiento social acá.
they're expressions
Bueno,
of the
esa sería
social
la
movement here
respuesta.
in Mexico directly.
Muchísimas gracias,
That would
Frida.
be the answer.
Gracias
Thank you, Frida.
por las respuestas. Hemos cerrado
Thank you so much for your
con
help.
esta respuesta, el segmento de
With
preguntas y
this
respuestas.
response, we
Agradecemos
close
enormemente
the
la
Q&A
participación de todos los que han estado, de todas y
section.
todos los que han estado
Thank you so
presentes
much
en
for the
este valioso
participation of
seminario que nos deja
everyone here
pues
in this
mucha
wonderful
información, pero
webinar
sobre todo
that
nos
give us a
deja
lot of
mucho compromiso y
information
muchas
and
tareas
give us
para
a lot of
continuar nuestro trabajo
kind of
en
commitment
pro
and tasks that we have
de la
to
lucha
kind of continue
antiimperialista en América
for
Latina
our work
y demandar
for
las
the
agresiones del
struggle,
imperialismo,
anti-imperialist
los
struggle
saqueos
in
y el
Latin
dominio
America
económico que quiere imponer en
against
nuestros países. El
economic
seminario
domination
dejó en
and
claro que
plunder.
el imperialismo
The
estadounidense continúa
webinar
siendo
left
la
clear
principal fuerza de
that the
opresión
United
y
States is
saqueo en la región,
the main
aunque su
source of plunder
hegemonía
and
enfrenta
extractivism in the
desafíos. Los
region,
tres
although
ponentes,
its hegemony
Malcolm,
is
Frida
facing
y el
a lot of
compañero
obstacles.
Richard,
The different
coincidieron en
speakers
que, pese a los matices de cada
all
país,
share
el
that
denominador
although
común
the
es la lucha de
differences
los
that we
pueblos por
have
su
in each of
soberanía
these
frente a
countries,
un
we have a
sistema que
common
busca
denominator
perpetuar el
of the people
subdesarrollo y que el imperialismo
fighting
estadounidense no actúa
against
solo, sino se
these
articula con
forces
potencias
and
secundarias como
that
Canadá y mantiene a países
the
con
U.S.
gobiernos
imperialism it
progresistas
doesn't
como
operate
México en
alone.
una situación de
It has the help
dependencia
of countries like
coterminada.
Canada,
Venezuela, por su parte, es
and
el
it
ejemplo más claro
directly affects
de que la
countries
lucha
like
antiimperialista
Mexico
sigue
and
siendo una
Venezuela,
batalla de
which is the
supervivencia.
clear
Los ponentes
example that the
coincidieron en que la única
anti-imperialistic
salida para la
struggle,
región es la
it's a
unidad y la
continued
construcción de alternativas soberanas,
struggle of a
rompiendo
lot
con
of
los
time.
mecanismos de saqueo y control
And
que impone
that it must be
Washington y sus
focused
aliados.
on disrupting the
Ante la
mechanisms of control and
creciente
plunder
agresión
from part
y
of the United
saqueo
States and its
imperialista,
allies.
debemos redoblar
Because of this
nuestro esfuerzo
pressure
para
of
unir nuestras luchas,
imperialist plunder, we need
construyendo
to
un amplio
regain
movimiento
bigger force
antiimperialista
and build
contra el
a
enemigo
wider
común de
movement,
los pueblos del
anti-imperialist
mundo, el
movement,
imperialismo
against the
estadounidense.
common
Debemos
enemy
seguir
of
fortaleciendo
the
la
peoples of the
ILPS
world, the U.S.
para
imperialism.
convertirla en una
We need
fuerza
to
a
continue
tener en cuenta,
strengthen the
capaz de
ILPS
impulsar una
to create
amplia
it a force
unidad
to be reckoned with,
antiimperialista y democrática
a
en
force to be reckoned
nuestros
with,
países
and a
y
force
en todo
of
el mundo.
support for democracy all around the world and fighting and continue our fight for socialism in the world. And we want to continue the campaign of the ILPS, the 25th, after its 25 years. We must remember that this unit is based on clearing solidarity and genuine support of the fight of our peoples. With this spirit, we have launched the campaign Free the Migrants. This is a campaign with International Migrants Alliance and international women's movements to continue fighting against neoliberal attacks and and capitalists that have been abusing migrant workers and have considered them a subclass within the working class around the world. They have systematized discrimination against them and giving them less wages than local workers, which contributes to the lowering of salaries of all workers. They utilize divide and conquer tactics between local workers and foreign workers, like xenophobia, to change the anger of the working class from going to the imperialists to foreign workers. It is important then that we create actual solidarity between locals and migrant workers so that they can fight together again for their liberation as a working class. With this, we finish our webinar today. Thank you everyone for participating. We expect them to see you again and continue the fight of the ILPS against the imperialist force. Long live international solidarity, and thank you for being in this webinar.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. I just wanted to say to comrades in Venezuela that we send all our condolences. And yes, you are not alone. We are with you around the world, and especially the members of the ILPS. And yes, we hear the call to build a chapter in Venezuela. So condolences and also viva la solidaridad internacional. Gracias, camaradas.